I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Here I am at a major Chamber of Commerce function about to receive an award, and Rhonda, my wife of 10 years, just whispered in my ear that she was going to leave with Gerald, my business partner, for a weekend of intimacy in Las Vegas immediately after the award ceremony. "Are you out of your mind?" I asked quietly, so as not to be heard by anyone else. "Only with desire," she whispered back. "For him. Right now, I can feel his excitement through his trousers, and soon I'll be sharing that intimacy with him. We need to talk, but not now. Later, after we get home from the ceremony," I replied. "No, Ron, I'm telling you how it's going to be. If you want to talk, you can give me some ideas, or maybe remind me of the things you've always wanted me to do with you, but refused. I'll be home Monday evening and we can talk then if you still feel the need." This was the start of a 3-day weekend, and I knew she didn't have to be back to work until Tuesday. "And you plotted this with him?" I asked quietly. "Of course. His wife also knows." I looked and saw my soon-to-be ex-partner and friend sitting next to Rhonda with a grin on his face. I wanted to punch the guy out, but not here, not in front of all these people, these so-called pillars of the community. I looked at Judy, his wife, who sat next to him. She didn't look too happy at all. Apparently, she also knew about this. My mind was racing, but I focused back on the present when I heard my name called by the Master of Ceremonies. I got up, shook his hand, and accepted the award, holding it for a second as a photographer took a picture. I gave my prepared acceptance speech and noticed as I did that Rhonda's hand was in Gerald's lap. I decided to make an impromptu change in my speech. On my notes, I had included an acknowledgement of my wife, but I ended my speech a bit early, not even mentioning her name. Instead, I thanked the community for their support and the chamber for the award, then ended my speech. I didn't know if anyone would notice the slight, but Rhonda mentioned it after I sat back down. "What? Didn't I even rate a mention?" she asked sarcastically as I took a sip of my now tepid drink. I simply glared at her, not saying a word. "So that's how it's going to be, huh? Well, like I said, we'll talk Monday evening when I get back." Gerald got up and headed for the podium, deliberately bumping into me on his way up. "If you go through with this, don't bother coming back," I whispered to Rhonda as Gerald spoke. "There'll be nothing here for you to come back to." To emphasize the point, I slipped my ring off my finger and handed it to her. She smirked as she dropped it in her purse. "You know why I'm doing this?" "Of course you do," she added. "It's for what you did with Judy. Don't lie. I know all about it. I have pictures. So you'll say or do nothing. Let me do this and we'll talk when I get back." "Don't do this, Rhonda. Nothing happened between Judy and me except dinner. We can talk about it after the ceremony." "Too late. It's going to happen. The tickets have already been bought. The reservations have already been made. I'm going to give Gerald my naked body this weekend. I'm going to let him do whatever he wants to me, and there's nothing you can say or do to stop me." "What if I told you he's HIV positive?" I asked. She laughed. "I wouldn't believe you. You'd say or do just about anything to keep me from going." "Don't say I didn't warn you. I guarantee that if you do this, you'll regret it for the rest of your life. Look, just enjoy the weekend without me. Go play golf or something. When I get back, things will go on as before," she said. I couldn't believe the nerve of this woman. "No, they won't, Rhonda." "We'll see about that," she said. A minute or two later, Gerald returned and took his seat. Rhonda turned to him, and I could see she had placed her hand back in his lap. Disgusted, I turned away from her. Finally, the event was over and we got up to leave. "This is your last chance, Rhonda," I said. She and Gerald smirked as they looked at me. "We're leaving now, Ron. I may call you, or not. Either way, I'll see you Monday." "No hard feelings, partner. I promise not to damage her too badly for you," Gerald said. "We're done, Gerald," I told him calmly. "As partners and friends, I don't ever want to see or hear from you again." "We'll see about that, partner," he said as he guided Rhonda away. I turned and looked at Judy, who had tears falling down her face. Do you need a ride home? I asked her. She shook her head. No, I have an Uber coming for me. Thanks for asking anyway. Didn't you tell them that nothing happened between us? That it was just a dinner and a conversation? I tried, but they wouldn't listen. Gerald has pictures of us at the restaurant, and Rhonda insists it was a prelude to an affair. You know how she can get sometimes. Yeah, I knew all right. Until now, the only complaint I had about Rhonda was her uncanny ability to act on false assumptions. And once she got something in her head, there was almost nothing anyone could do to change her mind. I see, I told her. I'm sorry, Ron. You don't deserve this. I only hope he thought enough to bring condoms. It doesn't matter, I said. Whether he uses a condom or not is immaterial. The fact that she's going to let him screw her is all that matters. No, I'm finished with both of them. What are you going to do? She asked. What I need to. What about you? I told Gerald if he went through with this, I'd divorce him. And that's exactly what I intend to do. This isn't the first time he's cheated on me, but by God, it'll be the last. Good for you, I said. Let me know if there's anything I can do. If you like, I can refer you to a good lawyer. Thanks, Ron. I appreciate that. With that, she left, and I followed shortly, making my way back to the car. On the way home, I thought about the last 10 years with Rhonda. We married about 5 years after Gerald and I went into business together. Gerald introduced me to her after we had been in business together for about 4 years. By then, he and Judy had been married for 3 years. Rhonda and I dated, fell in love, and got married. Gerald was the best man at our wedding, and I never would have believed he would be capable of doing something like this. I never thought Rhonda would either. By the time we got married, the business was growing significantly, so my lawyer suggested I have her sign a prenuptial agreement to protect my assets, which included my home and the business. She didn't like it, but she signed it anyway. I made sure the agreement was equitable and included a clause for infidelity. I had a lot to do and not a whole lot of time to get it done. It was still fairly early in the evening when I got home, so I called my lawyer, Jim Simpson, on his cell. Hey, Ron, he said. I thought you and Rhonda would be celebrating your award tonight. What's going on? He listened as I told him what happened earlier in the evening. Oh my God, Ron, I'm so sorry to hear that, he said when I finished. You want me to start drawing up papers? Yes, Jim. I want a divorce for adultery based on our prenuptial, and I want you to draw up papers dissolving the partnership. When Gerald and I drew up the partnership, we included a clause that said the partnership could be dissolved if one or more of the partners engaged in morally unacceptable behavior that could significantly impact the operation of the business. I felt this certainly fell into that category. Are you sure about that? He asked. Yes, absolutely. I want it reorganized as a sole proprietorship if possible. I know we had talked about incorporating it as a limited liability company before. Maybe this is the time to do that. All right, I'll get the ball rolling on that. It's going to take some time, though. I know, but I want the partnership dissolved as fast as possible, and I want my losses mitigated as much as possible. Consider it done, my friend, he replied. Thanks, I said, ending the call. I knew that under the terms of the agreement, I would have to pay Gerald something to get him out of the company, so the less I had to give him, the better. I knew Jim would come through for me. A couple of hours later, I got a call from Rhonda. I just wanted to let you know we're at the hotel in Vegas, and I'm so ready for a weekend of hot intimacy. Rhonda, you should know before you do this that Gerald is HIV positive. If you go through with this, you'll regret it for the rest of your life. Stop this nonsense and come home right now. If you do, then maybe, and I do mean maybe, we can fix our marriage. Oh, Ron, she said with a laugh. Are you still on that? Get over yourself. This is going to happen. I am going to let Gerald have me all weekend long. In fact, I'm getting excited just thinking about it. Rhonda, I'm warning you, I began to say, but she had already ended the call. That was it. I had warned her, but she refused to listen. The rest of my now screwed-up weekend was spent exorcising Rhonda from my life. On Jim's advice, I went to the bank on Saturday morning and took care of things there, paying off her credit card before canceling it. I got 3 voicemails from Rhonda and a few text messages over the weekend. She was doing her best to get me riled up. "Oh, yeah," she moaned in one of her voicemails. The other voicemails were very similar. I forwarded all of them to Jim so he could have them as proof of Rhonda's adultery. I also forwarded them to Judy so she could use them in her divorce from Gerald. I called a locksmith and had all of the locks changed on the doors. I wasn't worried about keeping the house, as I had bought it before we got married and the mortgage was in my name only. I tossed all of her clothes and prized possessions into trash bags and crammed them into her car, leaving enough room for her to drive. I pulled the car out of the garage and left it in the driveway. I pulled down all of the photos that included Rhonda. I broke up the large wedding portrait that hung over the fireplace before placing the broken pieces inside to be burned. By the time I was finished, there was no evidence that she had ever been in the place. After listening to her voicemails the next morning, I called her mother and said we need to talk. She invited me over for lunch, so I went. After eating a sandwich, she asked me what was going on, so I told her everything. I even played the voicemails Rhonda had left. By the time I finished, she was inconsolable. "That stupid, stupid girl. I can't believe she would do something like this to you. I'm so sorry, Ron. Of course, she can stay here until she gets back on her feet, but I'm going to tan her hide for this." "I'm sorry as well, Mom," I told her. I always thought of Rhonda's mother as Mom, especially since my own mother died from a stroke a few years before. She's going to need all the help and support you can give her. "Of course, but I'm still going to put her over my knee." I chuckled and gave her a hug. "Please stay in touch, Ron," she said as we broke the hug. I promised I would and left. She was still wiping tears from her face when I left. From there, I went to a tavern that served the juiciest burgers and enjoyed one with a couple of beers. Jim called me on Monday to say he had the paperwork drawn up, so I went to his office. Everything looked good, so I paid his retainer and left. The papers would be filed with the court the next day, which was Tuesday. "Where would you like her served?" Jim asked. "Preferably at her place of work. She humiliated me in public, so I think it's only fair I return the favor." "Okay," he said before I left. I got a couple more voicemails from Rhonda that day, the last one letting me know she was on her way home. I got a good laugh at that. Gerald dropped her off that evening at about 5:30, then took off. Apparently, he was a bit too cowardly to face me after what he had done. I waited and heard her come onto the porch. I heard her trying her keys, but none of them worked. Finally, she rang the doorbell. I ignored it for a few minutes, and she began pounding on the door. "Let me in, damn it!" she yelled. I got up and walked to the door. I opened it and stepped outside. She looked at me before trying to walk inside, but I stopped her. "What are you doing? I live here too." "No, you don't. Not anymore. You gave up that right when you left Friday night. But I told you I would be back and we could discuss things if you still wanted to. And why is my car in the driveway? Why isn't it in the garage? And what's all that stuff in it?" "That's all your stuff, Rhonda. Like I said, you don't live here anymore." "Look, I know you're upset. We can talk about it if you want," she replied. "I wanted to talk with you on Friday, but you weren't interested, remember? I practically begged you to listen to me, but you flat out refused and insisted on spending the weekend with Gerald." "That's right. Since you had his wife, I figured I deserved to get some revenge." "And what proof do you have that I had intimacy with Judy? Show me." She pulled out her phone and showed me a picture of Judy and me at a table in a restaurant. "What's that?" she asked. "That's 2 people talking over dinner. There's no intimacy in that picture, and nothing happened between Judy and I. For that matter, I have never been with another woman since you and I became exclusive." "Then why were you having dinner with her? Surely you expected something afterward." "There you go again, making false assumptions," I said. "What are you talking about?" she asked. That's what I wanted to talk to you about on Friday, but you refused to listen to me. Tell me, did Gerald ever use a condom this weekend? Of course not. You know I hate condoms, she replied. I see, and I guess you let him finish inside you multiple times. That's right. I still have some of him inside me right now. I was going to let you clean it out of me. And if you were truly sorry, I would have considered being intimate with you. But I don't think that's going to happen. So, you were planning to kill me then, I said. Her eyes grew wide. Of course not. Where did you get that silly idea from? Do you remember a few months back when he said he wasn't feeling too well? That was just a few weeks after he returned from a trip back east. Yeah, I remember, she said. I suggested he go see his doctor and get checked out. He never told me what the doctor said, but Judy learned he tested positive for HIV. You want to know how she learned about it? I'll tell you. She learned about it because he infected her. She tested positive just recently. That's what we were talking about at dinner that night. At the time he infected her, he didn't know he had it. But he sure as hell knew this last weekend when he was screwing you. I handed her a copy of Gerald's test results Judy had given me the night we had dinner. Rhonda's face turned white and her eyes widened. I even told you on Friday, but you refused to listen. Oh my God, she said, feeling nauseous. You were telling the truth. I'm going to get sick. She doubled over and vomited in the front yard. I stood and watched as she retched several times in the front yard. When she finished, she looked at me, scared. I'm going to die, aren't I? She asked. I shrugged my shoulders. I'm not a doctor, so I don't know. Judy said her doctor told her it's not the death sentence as it was a few years ago, but it's still pretty rough. At any rate, I suggest you go see Dr. Barnes first thing in the morning and let him know. Have him run some tests on you. Maybe if he can catch it early enough, he can do something. But I do know that our marriage is dead. Where will I go? She asked, tears falling down her face. Your mother said you can stay with her until you get on your feet, I replied. My mother? You told my mother? She asked, shocked. Yes, she deserves to know the truth, don't you think? I guess, she replied. And you'll be served with divorce papers at work sometime this week. Please, no, I don't want a divorce. Can't we work through this? No. We probably could have if you had talked to me on Friday instead of leaving me to spend the weekend with him in Vegas. But you just had to have things your way. You made your bed, Rhonda. Now you get to lie in it. So what were you doing with Judy in that restaurant? She asked. I already told you. Talking. She got her test results and wanted to talk to me. She asked if I had any idea he was positive. Of course, I told her the truth. I didn't. I was trying to find a way to help the two of them get through this. But it seems Gerald decided to have her followed. He got those pictures of us in the restaurant. Naturally, when you saw them, you made your usual false assumptions, and here we are. I hope it was all worth it to you. Please, can't you just give me one more chance? I'm dying here, she begged. I've been dying since you walked out on me Friday night, I replied. But I love you, she cried. Yeah, right, I thought. Don't you have any love for me at all? Love you? Right now, I don't even like you. Now get off my lawn. I walked back inside and slammed the door, locking it behind me. I looked through the window and saw her, sobbing as she knelt on the lawn. She looked totally defeated and forlorn, but right then, I didn't care. Eventually, she turned and slowly ambled to her car, still crying. As I watched, she backed out of the driveway and drove off, still crying. The next day, I got to the office early, hoping to catch Gerald when he came in. I had already advised security to confiscate his badge when he came in and had a couple security officers waiting by his office. When he arrived, he gave me a smirk, but lost it when he saw the officers. What's this all about? He asked. They're here to confiscate your badge and make sure you don't take any company property when you leave. Leave? I'm not going anywhere. Wrong answer. As of today, the partnership is dissolved. You no longer work here. That's not true. You can't do that. "Read the agreement we both signed," I said, tossing a copy of it on his desk. I highlighted the appropriate clause. "The dissolution of the partnership is being filed this morning, and the company is temporarily being reorganized as a sole proprietorship. I'll give you 15 minutes to pack your trash and get off the property before I have you escorted out." "Is this all because I had your wife over the weekend?" he asked. "Partly. It's also for deliberately exposing her to HIV, which I've been told is a crime in this state." "What?" he asked. "I saw your test results. Judy showed them to me. That's what we were discussing that day in the restaurant. She told me you infected her as well. I was planning to make you a silent partner so you could keep your medical coverage and still earn an income. But what you did this weekend was beyond the pale. You know you're infected, but you still chose to spend the weekend with Rhonda without informing her. That's illegal in this state. The two of you had this all planned out, except she didn't know you're HIV positive. In my view, what you did violates the terms of our partnership agreement. I had considered giving you a severance package, but in light of your actions, I've changed my mind. Now get out!" "You can't do this. I'll fight you on this. So help me God, I'll start spreading rumors that you've been screwing half the female staff here, threatening their jobs if they don't go along with what you want." "Really? You'd deliberately slander me in the community for revenge? On top of deliberately infecting my wife with HIV so she could infect me?" "Goddamn right," he replied. "By the time I'm done, you won't have any business at all." I smiled and pulled an audio recorder from my pocket. I hit a button and played our conversation back to him. "I think that should add a few million to the lawsuit and help secure a conviction. Not to mention the fact that you made your claim in front of at least 2 witnesses. Right?" I asked, looking at the 2 security guards, who smiled and nodded their heads. I looked at my watch. "You know, I used to think you were my best friend. I also used to think you were quite intelligent. I see now that my initial assessment of you was wrong. You have 10 minutes to pack up and get the hell off my property." I looked at the guards before speaking again. "Keep an eye on him. Make sure he doesn't touch his computer and only takes what's his." "Yes, sir, Mr. Hastings," one of the guards said. Gerald packed his stuff as the security guards watched. On his way out, he stopped by my office. "I'm sorry, Ron," he said. "Just go. Get out." After Gerald left, I called a meeting of all employees. It was crowded in the main office, but I felt they deserved to know there would be changes. I told them that Gerald was no longer with the company and the partnership had been dissolved. I assured them that this change wouldn't affect their jobs in the long run, but could cause some short-term disruption. One of the employees asked why Gerald left, but all I would say is that it was a personal matter. The next several weeks were a blur. Rhonda was served with divorce papers at her place of work on Thursday, which prompted a great deal of gossip. Her mother told me she had gone to see the doctor on Tuesday, but it would be a while before she got the results of her tests. Thankfully, Rhonda didn't deluge me with calls or texts. It seems she finally realized that she had made a huge mistake, one that would affect her for the rest of her life. Realizing there would be no reconciliation, she signed the papers. Jim told me the divorce would be final in 90 days. Judy filed for divorce against Gerald on the grounds of adultery. She told me he was living in a motel room that was rented by the week until he could find something else. But he had another problem. After Rhonda's visit, Dr. Barnes reported Gerald to the authorities. From what I learned, the state we live in requires those infected with HIV to inform their partners before any sexual activity takes place. Since Rhonda said Gerald never informed her, he could receive up to 20 years in prison. I also learned that this was one of those laws many prosecutors didn't like to enforce, since there was too great a chance of backlash. But the local authorities decided to go after Gerald, based on Rhonda's testimony. A week or so after being kicked out of his house, police showed up at the motel where he was staying and took him into custody. Concerned that he could present a danger to the general population, he was placed in solitary confinement. Gerald's trial became something of a circus. The prosecuting attorney painted him as a cruel, manipulative SOB who deliberately set out to infect me, his partner, with the disease by first infecting Rhonda. Rhonda testified, as did I. Judy also testified. The prosecutor also played the audio I captured in my office, putting Gerald in an even worse position. It didn't take long for the jury to convict. Disgusted by what he heard, the judge sentenced him to the maximum allowable by law, 20 years in the state penitentiary. But Gerald's problems were far from over. Now he was in the middle of a divorce as well as civil litigation. After Judy's divorce was finalized, she sold her home and moved out of the area. Rhonda contacted me a few days before our divorce was final and asked me if I would have dinner with her. After thinking about it, I agreed. I felt it was time for closure. We met at a quiet restaurant where we enjoyed a final meal. "I hope you're not too scared or ashamed to be seen with me," she said. "We're not going to be swapping any bodily fluids, so it shouldn't be a problem," I told her half-jokingly. "I got the results of my test. I'm positive." "I'm not surprised, but I am sorry to hear that. It's not your fault. You tried to warn me, but I wouldn't listen. It's a mistake I'll be paying for the rest of my life." "So, what is the doctor doing?" I asked. "He's got me on an antiretroviral therapy. It'll never be cured, but he tells me I can live a fairly normal life if I take the drug every day. Of course, I had to let my boss know. He's letting me telecommute so I can work from home, and Mom says I can stay with her as long as I need to." "That's good to hear," I replied. "My lawyer is also filing a lawsuit against Gerald. I've been told it's pretty much a slam dunk with his conviction, but collecting may be an issue with him being in prison and all." "I see. Well, I happen to know that his 401k was pretty substantial, even after subtracting Judy's portion. She also sold their house, so maybe you can get his half of that. Have you spoken with her recently?" "I have," she said. "She's out of the area, but we still talk from time to time. I'll mention that to her and see what she says." "What happened to you, Rhonda? I don't get it. I wanted to have kids with you, spend the rest of my life with you." "I don't know. When Gerald showed me those pictures of you with Judy, I lost it. I just knew you were having intimacy with her. I really jumped the shark on that, didn't I?" "Just a bit. But why didn't you just talk to me?" "I was angry. I didn't want to hear anything you had to say. Judy tried to warn me as well, but I figured she was in cahoots with you and would say anything to stop me. I even told you that Friday about Gerald. Twice. I hoped you would have gotten the hint. Frankly, I didn't want to hear anything you had to say, and now I'm paying the price. I'll be paying it for the rest of my life. Can you ever forgive me for being so stupid?" "I don't know," I replied. "Right now, it's all I can do to be civil around you." "I thank you for that at least. I know it's probably not easy for you. So, how are you holding up?" "I manage. I stay pretty busy with the business. Now that Gerald is gone, my workload has doubled, so there's no shortage of things to do." "Any women in your life?" she asked. "No, I'm not in the market for a relationship. Probably won't be for quite a while. Once bitten, twice shy, you know." "I'm sorry," she replied. "I've learned a thing or two myself from all of this," I said. "What's that?" she asked. "Never trust anyone. I knew Gerald for years before I met you. That is, I thought I knew him. I had no idea he was capable of doing what he did. And the things I learned about him during their divorce frankly make me sick to my stomach. And what you did certainly didn't help." "I'm sorry," she replied. "Yeah, well, it is what it is. I see you're still wearing your rings," I added, looking at her left hand. "We're still technically married, at least for a few more days. If you want them back, you can have them, but I was hoping you'd let me keep them." "I don't want them," I replied. "I'd just take them down and sell them anyway. Why would you want them?" "As a reminder of what I once had and threw away. They're yours. Do with them what you want." "Thank you," she said quietly, a tear falling down her cheek. "I'd better get going now. I have a lot to do yet tonight. Tell your mother I said hello and good luck." "I will, and thanks, Ron. I really am sorry about all this." "Yeah, me too, Rhonda. Goodbye." I could hear her sobbing as I left. I wasn't as angry as I was when this all first went down, but I still felt sad. It's not easy ending a decade-long relationship with someone you thought you'd spend the rest of your life with. Work went on as normal, and within a year, things had settled down to a steady roar. I had plenty of opportunities, but chose not to date or pursue a relationship. I still had some serious trust issues after what Rhonda and Gerald had done. For me, life consisted of working, eating, and sleeping. I had no social life whatsoever. A year and a half after my divorce, Denise, my secretary, introduced me to her younger sister, Angela, at a company event. She was a couple of years younger than me and had just gotten through a divorce from her husband, who left her for another woman. We began dating, taking things one step at a time, slowly. Both of us had been burned by our previous spouses and still had some trust issues. But as we spent more time together, our trust in each other grew. We dated several times over the course of a month before we ended up spending the night together in my bed. A few months later, I popped the question and she said yes. Our wedding is set for the spring, to be followed up with a 5-day Caribbean cruise. We extended an invitation to Rhonda's mother, but we don't know if she plans to attend. I'm still hurting from what Rhonda and Gerald did, but Angela has done a superb job of healing the scars. I've done my best to help her heal as well, and I'm certainly looking forward to spending the rest of my life with her. Thinking about Angela, I'm often reminded of the old saying, sometimes the bad things that happen in our lives put us directly on the path to the best things that will ever happen to us. And that's the end of today's story. If you enjoyed it, please give this video a thumbs up and drop a comment below. Your support helps the algorithm push my content further. If you're new to the channel, don't forget to hit that subscribe button. It really helps me keep creating more stories for you. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. As soon as Lisa came in the door, I took one look at her, and somehow I knew. I knew that my wife had cheated. She had told me that she had to work late, maybe she did, but somehow I knew she had done more than work. How did I know? Part of it was just intuition, and part of it was the look on her face and the nervous way she moved when she got home that night. Lisa was a terrible poker player. For my part, I have a good poker face, and I didn't let on that I suspected that my wife of 5 years had done anything wrong. What I did do was hire a private investigator. I wanted proof. Lisa and I were both 27. I met her during our senior year of college. We dated for 2 years before getting married. One thing that I thought we had in common was our values and that we believed in total fidelity to each other. I had made it clear before we tied the knot that cheating was definitely a deal breaker. The sad thing was that up until now, I had thought we had a perfect life. I'm not one of those guys who is so focused on his career that he ignores his wife. On the contrary, I was always buying her flowers and little presents. I took her out and wined and dined her. And she never lacked intimacy, as I have a pretty high drive. I've been told I'm good looking and I work out to keep in shape. Yeah, I'm sure I have my flaws, but taking care of my wife wasn't one of them. Lisa wasn't what would be termed a stone-cold fox, but she was pretty and had a nice figure. She had curves in the right place. Lisa worked as a paralegal for a prestigious law firm. She was usually home at the end of the workday, but occasionally had to work late on an important case. I work in the high-tech industry and make a good living. Lisa came from a fairly wealthy family. Her dad owned a large ranch in Texas on which oil had been found. He had insisted that we sign a prenuptial agreement. Included in it was that in the event of divorce, none of the assets we had prior to our marriage could be touched, and further, any inheritance from family was likewise exempt. I wasn't marrying her for money, so I had no problem signing. I never cared for her dad, as he was a devout racist, always disparaging blacks and Mexicans. At least I didn't see that trait in Lisa, and since we lived a long distance from them and didn't spend time around them, I was fine. The private investigator that I hired was the one a buddy of mine had used to get the dirt on his cheating wife. He had been impressed with how efficient this guy was. Anyway, The day after I first suspected something was wrong, I was in the private investigator's office telling him what I wanted, and once he accepted my retainer, he went to work on the case. It took my wife a few days after what I thought was her first time to cheat to return to normal. I had continued to act the role of the loving husband, and she obviously thought she had got away with it. It was exactly a week later that I got the call from her that she had to work late again. I called the private investigator and let him know. Again, when she got home, she looked somewhat guilty. Not as bad as the first time, so I guess she was getting used to the idea I wouldn't find out, and she could do as she saw fit. I got a call from the investigator the next day that confirmed my suspicions. She was screwing some guy she worked with, and they were doing it right in the offices after everyone else had left for the day. Apparently, he had some photos made through the window from the building across the street, but they weren't all that clear. He asked me if I wanted him to continue on the case, and I asked him if he could get them on video. He said it could be done, but it would cost more. I wasn't hurting for cash, so I told him it was covered and to get it done. As for me, I came down with a stomach virus that kept me from having intimacy with my wife. Or at least that was what I told Lisa. I only hoped I hadn't already got an STD from her. I then set my plan in motion. I guess one of my faults is that I like to play poker. I would get together maybe once a month with some buddies to play. I usually came out ahead, so I thought for an amateur I wasn't bad. I also played poker online. Nothing big, just $5 and $10 buy-in games. We had built up a nest egg of a little over 200 grand, and since I contributed the most, I didn't want Lisa to have any part of it. That's where online poker came in. With my knowledge and skills, I set up 5 untraceable accounts on a poker site to work through. All accounts were mine, so I was able to play myself in head-to-head matches and lose to myself. Yeah, I lost some to the site, taking a rake for each game. But it was less than what Lisa would get in a divorce. It would be less suspicious if I lost all our money to 5 other players than to just one. The site I played, of course, wasn't based in the US and wasn't likely to give up any information on their clients. It took a week, but by then I had cleaned our bank accounts of all but 10 grand. Once again, exactly 1 week to the day, Lisa called and said she had to work late, and I called the private investigator to let him know. He told me he had it covered. This time, when my wife got home, there was hardly any trace of guilt. She was getting good at cheating. The next morning, I got the call from the private investigator, and he said he had what I wanted. I headed for his office and picked up the DVD. He told me he could have a written report in a couple of days if I wanted it, but I told him that this should be enough. I paid him for his time and told him I would call if I needed anything more. He told me he was sorry about the way things turned out. I laughed and told him he had no reason to be sorry. He wasn't the one cheating on me. I took the DVD and went back to work and locked myself into my office, telling my assistant that I didn't want to be disturbed. I noticed I wasn't nervous when I clicked play. Hell, I already knew she was messing around with me, and it wasn't like this was going to change anything. The video had obviously been shot from a hidden camera in the law office. It had a high-quality picture as well as sound. I don't know how the private investigator pulled it off, and I don't want to. All I cared about was that I had what I wanted. I had never met the guy my wife was being intimate with, but the private investigator had provided me with a lot of information on him. I knew he was married with 2 children. I knew who his parents were and where he grew up. I knew where he went to church with his family. What I hadn't known and only learned when I watched the video was that the guy was black. I hadn't seen the first pictures the private investigator took as I wanted video, and the private investigator hadn't mentioned the fact that my wife's lover was black. Now I know what you are thinking. She went after a big black Johnson. Well, when I saw him, I noticed he wasn't any more hung than I was. Maybe even a little smaller than me. I watched the video with total detachment. I had already lost all feelings for her. I know guys who had been in my position and had become emotional basket cases. They wanted to know why their wife had done this to them. Personally, I didn't care. She had done it, and that was all that mattered. I sure didn't care why. One thing I did notice was that there was no mention of me or his wife while they were together. The intimacy wasn't all that interesting. A little and straight to the point. The one thing that did stand out was them running down the partners of the law firm. Interesting. After I watched the video, I went to my boss and told him that I needed a week off to handle personal business. We were pretty good friends, and I gave him the basic idea of what was going on and asked him to help cover for me. I told him I needed to be out of town for several days. He had caught his ex-wife cheating on him 2 years ago and was very sympathetic. He said he could do better than that. He gave me a list of some customers out of state that he thought it would be nice if I made a call on. That way, I had a legitimate reason to be gone and I wouldn't even have to use vacation time. I took off early and went home and packed a suitcase. I called my wife and told her that one of our customers out of state had a major emergency with their computer systems, and I had to go out of town to deal with it. This wasn't anything totally unusual, as I did occasionally travel on business, but not very often. She told me she loved me and would miss me and to hurry home. I simply said I had to rush to catch my flight. I don't know if she picked up on the fact that I hadn't told her I loved her too. I caught a flight out of state and set about completing the next stage of my plan. I made a bunch of copies of the video and then put them into mailers and addressed them. To have plausible deniability that I had anything to do with them, I overnighted them to an old college friend who lived on the East Coast. I had called him and asked for a favor. I told him he would receive a box that I had sent next day delivery. All he had to do was open it and take each mailer and drop them in the mail so the postmark showed where they were sent from. I was halfway across the country with witnesses as to my location and where I was working. Yeah, I know it all sounds a bit cloak and dagger, and if things worked out as I suspected, it was overkill, but I just wanted to make sure what I was doing wasn't traced back to me. I had a video sent to every person I could find the name of, who worked for the law firm that Lisa worked for. Others were sent to the wife, parents, and pastor of his church. There was one sent to my wife's parents and to the preacher where they attended church, and copies to every one of her old friends I could find an address for. I also had them sent to all of our current friends. Now, I know a lot of guys would be embarrassed to have their friends know that their wives messed around on them. Not me. She was the cheating woman who had broken her vows. I was the innocent victim. The last one was sent to my home and addressed to me. With each video was a list of amateur sites where I had anonymously posted it for all to see. By Thursday, the shit began to hit the fan. I don't know all the details, but my wife and her lover were called into their boss's office, shown the video, and summarily fired. Next, my wife started receiving phone calls from her friends who had seen the video. Her dad called her and screamed over the phone at her and told her never to contact him or her mother ever again. On Friday, I got a call from a couple of our friends on my mobile asking if I knew about the videos. I told them I was out of town working and didn't know what they were talking about. They clued me in on to what was happening. It was nice to know that some of my friends were more loyal than my wife. I called my house, and a very nervous-sounding Lisa answered the phone. I told her about the calls from our friends about the video. I then told her I was on my way to the airport to fly home, and that if what I had heard was true, she had better be gone by the time I got home and to get a lawyer. She was gone when I got home. She had packed up some clothes and not much else. I found out later that she had a divorced friend who was letting her stay with her. As it happens, her friend was divorced for being a cheating woman. I contacted a lawyer and set the divorce in motion. I told Lisa I never wanted to see her again, and the only contact I would have with her was through our lawyers. Lisa's lawyer was a pathetic sleazebag. After everything had gone public, most lawyers didn't want to have anything to do with her. I guess her ex-employer had put out the word that she was persona non grata. When I listed our assets at 10 grand, she had a fit. Of course, I had enough evidence to prove I had gambled away the rest and had done so before I knew of her cheating. Our only other asset was the house, but with the decline in the real estate market, we were going to be upside down when it was sold. We had only been living there for 3 years. Lisa didn't understand that and got a court order to sell the house and split the proceeds. I didn't care as I had no plans to stay in the house anyway, and she couldn't afford the payments being out of work. I had to pay $8,000 to pay off the rest of the mortgage after the house sold, so our net worth was now listed at $2,000. She also sued for alimony. The final judgment was that it was her fault she was not working, but she had the ability to work and alimony was denied. I gave her a check for $1,000. She owed more than that to her lawyer. She had screwed herself and now she was broke, virtually left without any friends and with no family to turn to. She also knew that she would never work in our city again, as this had become a widely known scandal. She had no choice but to move out of state. I threatened to sue the law firm that Lisa had worked for on the grounds that they should have known what was going on between two employees who were married to other people, and they were doing it in their offices, apparently, on company time. I settled for $300,000, which they willingly paid to get the mess over with. They didn't want any more publicity to tarnish their reputation any more than it had been. I cashed out my accounts from the online poker site and recouped most of my money. Along with the money from the settlement with the law firm, I came out rather well financially. I would have given it all away to have still had a loving and faithful wife, but I couldn't change that. What I do know of Lisa over the last couple of years is that she works as a waitress and is struggling to get by. It seems that any time she applied for a better job, a copy of her infamous video would mysteriously arrive at the company she applied to. I guess a cheating wife who messes in the office while on the clock and speaks disparagingly of her employers does not go over well on her resume. As for me, well, I know a few ladies who are friends with benefits. Will I get married again? Maybe, who knows? My parents and both of my grandparents have had good, long-lasting marriages. Maybe I'll get lucky and meet the right woman. Of course, I will let her know how I feel about cheating, even though it hasn't done much for Lisa and me. And that's the end of today's story. If you enjoyed it, please give this video a thumbs up and drop a comment below. Your support helps the algorithm push my content further. If you're new to the channel, don't forget to hit that subscribe button. It really helps me keep creating more stories for you. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.